Rikers Island, the psychological toll of NYC's most notorious jail. Buried in the East River, between Queens and the Bronx, sits a place so chaotic, so psychologically corrosive, that even seasoned officers call it the island that eats you alive. But here's the real nightmare. Most people locked inside Rikers haven't even been convicted of a crime. They're legally innocent, yet they're thrown into an environment where violence is currency, fear is routine, and mental health collapses at a speed no one on the outside can imagine. Tonight, we go inside the concrete nerve center of New York City's jail system. A place where 6,000 human beings are trapped in a pressure cooker of overcrowding, gang control, staff shortages, and psychological breakdowns. A place where one bad minute can alter your mind forever. This is not a story about prison. This is a story about what happens to the mind inside the most notorious jail in America. Welcome to Rikers Island. This documentary contains descriptions of prison conditions and violence for educational purposes based on verified sources. Viewer discretion is advised. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts on Rikers, and subscribe for weekly documentaries that pull back the curtain on America's most notorious jails and the psychology behind them. Your support helps us bring these untold stories to light. Rikers Island has been called many things: a holding facility, a revolving door, a legal disaster, but above all, it is a psychological battlefield. Unlike state prisons where people serve sentences, Rikers is a pretrial jail, meaning almost everyone inside is waiting for court, waiting for answers, waiting for hope. The waiting becomes its own form of punishment, and the uncertainty slowly eats away at the mind. Over the next chapters, we'll explore how violence becomes a survival strategy, why mental health collapses inside overcrowded dorms, how isolation reshapes personality, the psychological impact of pretrial detention, why reforms fail again and again, and what the future of Rikers might look like. You will hear realistic but fictionalized stories inspired by officers, inmates, clinicians, and families who felt the island's pressure firsthand. Stories that reveal the emotional damage no report or statistic can fully capture. Now we begin inside the one place where fear, uncertainty, and human psychology collide, every minute of every day. Inside Rikers Island. The first thing people notice isn't the walls. It's the sound. A constant echo, steel doors, boots on concrete, radios crackling with codes that mean danger is always one heartbeat away. In the intake unit, detainees sit on plastic chairs for hours, sometimes days, waiting to be processed. That's when the psychological unraveling begins. You see people rocking, muttering, pacing, others staring blankly at the floor, already numb. One of them is a 22-year-old named Malik. He was arrested on a low-level charge he insists he didn't commit. No conviction. No sentence. Just waiting for a court date he can't control. Within his first 3 hours inside, he watches 2 fights break out in front of him, bloody, fast, and fueled by pure adrenaline. Malik keeps his head down, but the message is clear. Survive. At any cost. For officers, the pressure is just as intense. They're expected to control violent dorms with staff shortages so severe that officers sometimes supervise 40 to 60 detainees alone. Every shift becomes a tightrope walk between authority and overwhelm. Inside Rikers, the environment doesn't simply punish bad behavior. It shapes new behavior. And for many, the transformation starts faster than anyone wants to admit. The mental health crisis. The truth about Rikers is this. Violence is visible. But the real damage happens silently. Every psychologist who has ever worked on the island says the same thing. Rikers breaks people long before it bruises them. In the mental health housing units, clinicians move from cell to cell with clipboards in hand, but their eyes tell the real story. They're exhausted, overwhelmed, outnumbered, and in many cases, scared. The majority of detainees at Rikers live with some form of mental illness: depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, PTSD. Some arrive with these conditions. Others develop them inside. Take Daniel, a 45-year-old man picked up for petty theft. He had no prior mental health issues. None. But 2 months into his stay at Rikers, he refuses to sleep. He sits in a corner, knees to his chest, whispering that someone is coming for him. What changed? Not a diagnosis. Not medication. The environment. Sleep deprivation is almost guaranteed. Lights stay bright. Fights erupt randomly. Shouting bounces off concrete at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., sometimes continuously. The human brain was never built for this level of unpredictability. And the collapse comes fast. Clinicians try to intervene, but they're stretched thin. Constant shortages means some mental health rounds last under a minute. Quick check-ins. Fast assessments. Move to the next cell before something breaks loose behind you. And when someone spirals too far, the system's answer is often the same. Isolation. A space that was meant to calm the unstable becomes the spark that makes the instability permanent. Inside isolation, detainees describe hearing voices that weren't there before, seeing shadows that follow them, feeling a rage they can't explain. Others wilt completely, mind empty, body weak, spirit gone. Prison psychiatrists call this decompensation. But former detainees call it something else. The Rikers effect. A mental unraveling caused not by crime, not by guilt, but by the sheer weight of surviving the island day after day. And the worst part? Most of these men and women will eventually walk back into the city, unchanged legally, but forever altered psychologically. Getting released doesn't mean you escaped Rikers, one clinician says. It just means Rikers comes home with you. When mental health collapses, violence isn't just a possibility. It becomes the language of the place, which leads us deeper into the heart of the island's most dangerous cycle. Violence and isolation. Violence inside Rikers isn't random. It isn't sudden. It builds, slowly, invisibly, until it erupts without warning. Every dorm, every hallway, every unit has its own rules. Not written, not spoken by staff, but enforced brutally by the detainees who run the internal hierarchy. Some people join gangs for protection. Some stay neutral and pray that's enough. And some, like Malik, are simply trying to avoid being noticed at all. But inside Rikers, invisibility is a myth. One evening in the adolescent unit, a shift falls apart. A single officer is left supervising dozens of restless detainees. It's humid, but tension hangs in the air like static. And then it happens. A chair scrapes. A shout. Two bodies collide. A fist cracks against bone. Within seconds, the entire dorm erupts. The officer radios for help, but backup is on the other side of the compound. Response times lag. And for those trapped in the circle of chaos, every second feels like a minute. Malik presses himself against the wall, heart sprinting inside his chest, watching men he met only days ago swing for survival. He doesn't get involved, but that choice has consequences too. In Rikers, refusing to fight can be seen as weakness. Weakness invites targeting. It's a cycle that feeds itself. Fear creates violence. Violence creates more fear. And the environment becomes the architect of both. The psychological transition. After every violent incident, detainees describe the same shift happening inside them. A hardening. A sharpening. A sense that you must either adapt or be consumed. Clinicians call it hypervigilance, a state where the brain stays locked in fight or flight mode, even when the danger is gone. But for detainees, it feels more primal. If I relax, I die. Isolation as a solution or punishment. When violence spirals, many are sent to isolation units. Small concrete rooms. Metal beds. A slot for food. Isolation was originally intended to stabilize behavior. Instead, it often shatters the mind. Inside those cells, the silence becomes louder than any fistfight. Minutes stretch. Thoughts distort. And the loneliness digs into the psyche like a blade. Some detainees start punching the walls. Some scream just to feel like they exist. Others count the bricks, over and over, until numbers stop meaning anything. And then there are moments like this. A young man named Avery, held in isolation after a fight, begins mumbling to an imaginary friend he swears is sitting in the corner. When officers open the door, he doesn't look at them. He looks past them, at someone who isn't there. This is how isolation rewires the brain. The system expects it to produce order. Instead, it manufactures psychological collapse. And in a place where most people are awaiting trial, legally innocent, the damage becomes a haunting contradiction. Next, we explore the most overlooked aspect of Rikers Island: what pretrial detention does to the human mind. Pretrial detention psychology. Before Rikers breaks the body, before it breaks the spirit, it breaks something most people take for granted: the sense of control over your own life. Pretrial detention means you are locked up without being convicted. But the mind doesn't accept that logic. Because inside Rikers, innocence doesn't protect you. It doesn't soften the environment. It doesn't slow the violence. You wait. And waiting becomes its own form of psychological punishment. The uncertainty spiral. Every detainee describes the same mental loop. When is my court date? Will the judge believe me? Will my lawyer show up? What if the case gets postponed again? Days feel like weeks. Weeks feel like months. And every delay becomes another crack in the mind. Malik experiences this breakdown firsthand. His court date, originally set for 2 weeks after his arrival, has already been postponed twice. Not because of evidence. Not because of his behavior. But because the system is overloaded, understaffed, and constantly backlogged. His mother calls every day asking when he's coming home. He tells her soon. He doesn't believe it. But it keeps her calm, which is all he can control. Identity dissolving. In the outside world, you're a son, a father, a worker, a friend. Inside Rikers, you become a number, a body in a bunk, a problem to be managed, a case waiting for movement. Psychologists call this identity erosion. The slow process of losing the person you were before confinement. Some detainees detach completely. They avoid thinking about home. They stop planning for the future. Because the future feels imaginary. The courtroom shock. When detainees finally get taken to court, the mental whiplash is overwhelming. They leave a chaotic dorm at dawn. Shouting, movement, unpredictability. And suddenly they're in a quiet courtroom where life-altering decisions are made in under 5 minutes. Some stand before the judge trembling, already psychologically fractured. Others speak aggressively, not out of guilt, but out of frustration from being unheard for weeks or months. And judges often misinterpret this behavior. What looks like disrespect is actually trauma in real time. The psychological equation of Rikers. Inside the mind of a detainee, a simple formula forms. If the system doesn't care about me, why should I care about myself? Depression deepens. Impulse control deteriorates. Hope collapses. And this state of mind leads to 3 dangerous outcomes. Self-harm, aggression, emotional numbness. All 3 are psychological shields. Ways to survive a place designed for instability. A consequence few talk about. Many pretrial detainees eventually have their charges dismissed. Their cases resolved. Their names cleared. But by the time they walk out of Rikers, they're not the same person who walked in. One detainee described it like this: I beat the case, but I didn't beat Rikers. The damage stays. The flashbacks stay. The anxiety stays. The anger stays. The scars you can't see are the ones that last the longest. Next, we look at the attempts, some sincere, some political, to fix this collapsing system, and why so many of them fail before they even begin. Reform efforts. Every few years, someone steps to a podium in New York City and promises the same thing. We're going to fix Rikers Island. But fixing Rikers has become one of the most complicated, emotionally charged, and politically explosive missions in modern criminal justice. Because the problem isn't just the buildings. It's the culture, the leadership, the staffing, the policies, the violence, the mental health collapse, and the public pressure boiling over from every direction. The cycle of promises. New commissioners cycle in with bold ideas. More training, better oversight, reduced isolation, more mental health clinicians, new safety equipment, new strategies for reducing violence. On paper, it all sounds transformative. But in practice, most reforms die in the same place. The reality of Rikers itself. Staff shortages make new protocols impossible. Overcrowding turns every rule into a suggestion. Gang control inside dorms undermines safety strategies. Budget constraints choke mental health programs. And political turnover resets the system every election cycle. One former officer summed it up like this: "You can't reform Rikers from a conference room. The island has a heartbeat of its own." The mental health movement. Some reforms focus on mental health, arguably the most urgent crisis. Advocates push for trauma-informed units, more clinicians, therapeutic programming, and alternatives to isolation. Clinicians agree with all of it. But they also say the same painful truth. No amount of therapy can fix a place that keeps traumatizing people every day. Shutting down Rikers, the boldest proposal. In 2017, New York City announced a historic plan. Rikers Island will shut down. The idea was to replace the aging complex with smaller, safer, borough-based facilities that keep detainees closer to their families, their courts, and their communities. It was ambitious and immediately controversial. Some saw it as a moment of progress. Others feared it was unrealistic. And inside Rikers, detainees responded with mixed emotions. Some felt hope. Others laughed, convinced it would never happen, because they understood something political leaders often forget. Closing Rikers is not the same as fixing the culture that created it. Why reform fails on the ground? Reforms collapse for three main reasons. The environment resets everyone's intentions. Even well-meaning officers become defensive in violent conditions. Even motivated detainees become hardened under constant threat. Turnover destroys continuity. Every new leader starts from scratch. The island isolates itself, physically and psychologically. It operates like a world apart from the city that governs it. A glimpse of change. Still, there are small pockets of progress. Some units pilot group therapy sessions. Some officers receive crisis intervention training. Some dorms stabilize with stronger supervision. These shifts don't transform the island, but they show what's possible when safety and mental health work together. As one clinician said, Rikers doesn't need miracles. It needs consistency. And consistency is the one thing we've never truly had. But even with reform efforts underway, one question overshadows everything. What will Rikers become in the years ahead? Because the future of the island is still uncertain. And so are the minds of the thousands who pass through it every year. The future of Rikers. The future of Rikers Island hangs in a strange place. Caught between political promises, public outrage, and a system that seems determined to repeat itself. On paper, the plan is clear. Shut down Rikers. Replace it with smaller, borough-based jails. Create safer, more humane facilities. But the reality is far from certain. Construction delays, lawsuits, budget fights, neighborhood resistance, and shifting city leadership have slowed the timeline again and again. For some New Yorkers, closing Rikers feels like hope. For others, it feels like a gamble. And inside the jail itself? Most people don't believe it will ever actually happen. The system at a crossroads. Rikers has become more than a jail. It's a symbol of broken systems, of neglected mental health, of violence that grows faster than reform, of the psychological damage that outlasts detention. Closing it won't magically undo decades of trauma. But keeping it open means the cycle continues. City council members argue over logistics. Advocates push for immediate closure. Officers demand safer working conditions. Families of detainees just want their loved ones to survive long enough to come home. Everyone has a different vision for the island's future. But the one thing nearly everyone agrees on is this. Rikers cannot stay the way it is. A question of humanity. The heart of the debate isn't political. It's psychological. What does a city owe the people it detains before trial? What does a justice system become when the mentally ill and the vulnerable are housed in a place known for worsening both? How can true rehabilitation exist in an environment built on fear? These questions echo far beyond New York City. Because the struggle at Rikers mirrors a national crisis. The collision between criminal justice and mental health. The psychological ripple effect. Even if Rikers closes, the trauma it created won't vanish. Former detainees carry it. Officers carry it. Clinicians carry it. Families carry it. Communities carry it. One social worker said it best. Ending Rikers doesn't end the story. It ends the chapter. The real future depends on what comes next. Whether the city builds something safer, smarter, and human-centered, or simply rebuilds the same system with new paint. Standing on the edge of a decision, Rikers Island is at a turning point. The question is whether that turn leads toward progress, or deeper into the same failures that made Rikers infamous. Because the island won't just be judged by what it has done to the people inside, but by what New York City chooses to do about it. And that choice will determine the future of thousands of minds. Minds shaped, scarred, or saved by the system that replaces Rikers. Next comes the final moment of our journey. A reflection on what Rikers truly represents. And whether redemption is still possible. Reform or resistance. Rikers Island is more than concrete and steel. It is a mirror, reflecting the choices of a city, a society, and a justice system. Every cell, every dorm, every isolation unit tells the same story. Neglect, fear, and chaos leave marks that last a lifetime. The future of Rikers is uncertain, but one thing is clear. The psychological toll of this jail does not end at the gate. It follows people home. It follows families. It follows communities. And it follows the city that built it. Reform is possible. Smaller, safer facilities could reduce violence. Better mental health care could save lives. Consistency and oversight could protect both detainees and staff. But reform requires more than plans and promises. It demands courage, accountability, and a willingness to face the human cost of inaction. For every Malik, every Daniel, every Avery, Rikers is not just a place. It is a crucible that tests humanity. And the question we must ask ourselves is, will the city respond with reform, or will it allow history and psychology to repeat itself? If you want to understand more about the American criminal justice system, the psychology of incarceration, and the stories that often go untold, subscribe now and join us for weekly documentaries that pull back the curtain on the world behind bars. Because the mind, the law, and society are more connected than most of us realize. And understanding them may be the only way to change the future. I've now completed the full, non-repetitive documentary script for Rikers Island, the psychological toll of NYC's most notorious jail.